We not only can't be silent, but we have to find ways of getting people out on the streets and using all of what we've learned to get the rights we had by enlarging the tent, by creating that humanism, by finding that basic humanity in everyone, so that never again really means never again.
It's important to be part of a union because you have to have a voice.
Welcome to Union Talk. I'm Randi Weingarten. As many of you know, many of the members know, I don't think any of you know, that my wife was the first openly LGBTQ rabbi of a congregation in the United States of America. And the largest LGBTQ congregation, she just retired last July 31st. But she has several speaking gigs this month, including at her hometown of Rutherford, New Jersey today, which now has, given, for somebody who obviously knows Rutherford, given what it was like when she grew up and the fact that they have gay festival is pretty remarkable. So that's today, and I'm missing that to be here. But what I wouldn't miss last night was that she was the Shabbos dinner speaker at one of the foremost conservative congregations in the United States of America, Anshe Hesed, which is like one of the flagship congregations, and she was asked to speak there. And as I talk about Pride Month, she reminded people, as we were singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow to one of the Jewish songs, to Oseh Shalom, using the tune, she reminded people, and this is not a gay synagogue, but she reminded people of what those of us who were kind of lesbians in the 70s, as Patty just smiled, how we had absolutely no rights. In many ways, we didn't get lynched often, although Matthew Shepard did, but it was the legal structure for us was like the legal structure for people who were African American between the Civil War or before the Civil War to the 64 and 65 Civil Rights Act. Although we never got, and I'm just centering myself as a lesbian right now, not as AFT president, we never got the national rights with the exception of the Supreme Court case on the right to marry. We've never, as much as we've tried, we've never gotten that. And so as AIDS was ravaging our communities, we had no rights. And her reminder of that to this audience, I thought was prophetic for right now, which is why I'm dwelling on that instead of my notes that I was going to dwell on. Because as we see people getting disappeared, as we see rights taken away, many of us were in that situation where we could get fired for any reason and no reason at all. And in fact, what authoritarians do is that they really do focus on four kind of different groups of people. One is LGBTQ, and you see the trans focus right now. But the first thing that Hitler did, the first books that were burned, the first book burning was this sexual institute that was in Berlin. Yes, exactly. Run by Marcus, I think that's his name, Hirschfeld. What? Magnus Hirschfeld. Thank you. First thing Hitler did. Just like $250 million of ads that Trump did about she's for they, them, for you. In football games after football games. LGBT, women, Jews, immigrants. think about what Trump does. So 2 things I want to say as I introduce these young people. 1, we have been in this position before, historically out of this country, but also in this country, to the gay folk who are sitting in front of me right now. We've been in a situation where we've had no rights. None. And where, frankly, none of our institutions would support us in any way, form, or manner. As the closeted gay person was as I was advancing at the UFT. None. None. And look where we all are right now. That took fight with a lot of joy, because frankly, straight people do not understand how gay people kept on having a lot of fun and a lot of joy when we had no rights, which is part of the reason why we're having engaged discussion, but we're also having a party, because joy is an act of political and spiritual resistance, as are the rainbows. And we understood during AIDS, even with no rights, that silence equaled death. And so for many of you who have heard me in a different context, in different ways, talking to different audiences, our audiences of unionists, when you hear me say, we have to be on the streets, this, you know, as well as I do, in this room, for these young people, silence equals death. There is no rock that's big enough or large enough that we can hide in, because this administration wants to undermine and subjugate us, and will use us and immigrants and others as a cudgel to do that. We have to be present. And while none of us can do everything, all of us can do something. But present means we, on behalf of all of us, now I'm talking to all of them, on behalf of all of you, we not only can't be silent, but we have to find ways of getting people out on the streets and using all of what we've learned to get the rights we had, by enlarging the tent, by creating that humanism, by finding that basic humanity in everyone, so that never again really means never again. We owe it to these young people to not be scared, to not be frightened, and to not be silent. As teachers, and as people, many of us, who have seen a world where we had no rights to a moment like this. That, my friends, if you remember anything that I say today, anything, that is our obligation to our members, to our community, to our society, and mostly to these young people. And with that, I'm going to let Skye tell everybody who everybody is, and then I'm going to do several questions, but I'm going to end with a lightning rod.
We're going to be doing a Union Talk Live session today, as you know, and this is specifically so we can center these amazing young people here. In this moment, when our communities are facing relentless attacks, book bans, and anti-trans laws, to the erosion of basic rights, young people are organizing, educating, and protesting and reimagining our world. So we're going to move into introducing our amazing speakers. So first off, I'm Skye Tooley, they, them. I'm from United Teachers Los Angeles. I've been a teacher now for 10 years in the classroom. I came out in the classroom as well, transitioned in the classroom. It's been an amazing, amazing moment, contrary to what it might seem, but it's also been very difficult. And the amazing side, it's been great to see students who see me in front of them and feel uplifted and hopeful. And I see them be their more authentic selves with me. And then on the opposite end, I've also experienced doxing. I've been on Fox News. I've been on Libs of TikTok. I actually was just on it apparently 2 days ago because I started receiving more hate comments. I was like, oh, what happened? So it's a consistent back and forth of existing, but I also will keep existing, keep being out and proud and in front of my students because I know that's what my ancestors fought for. That's what Marsha P. Johnson fought for. That's what Sylvia Rivera fought for. I stand with them, with my ancestors. And I know that they are behind us, and I know that they are for us. I stand also because next Benedict should still be here. And I understand that we stand in places where my trans siblings cannot. Recently, we lost another trans person in the LA community. And it just constantly is this, as you were saying, it's this constant celebration and then protest, right? As someone once said, we protest during the day and then we party at night, right? Because we have to lean into that queer joy. We have to lean into each other and we have to lean into community. And speaking to what happened in LA, that is community, right? It's white people especially putting their bodies on the line and stepping in front. And it's especially our cis gay people stepping in front of trans people to protect us. It's us putting our bodies on the line as white people, knowing that we need to uplift Black trans women, and we need to uplift them first before we uplift anyone else. We need to make sure that we are uplifting our siblings over in Palestine who are experiencing horrendous attacks against them. We need to stand together in community from there to here because we are all in one world and we are all in this together. And these attacks that are happening here against our speeches, these attacks that are happening against us, this is just the start. It's a test, right? To see how far they can go before we push back. So how far are we going to push back, right? So speaking to that now, we have these amazing, amazing people who have been pushing back. We have Rehman Hassan, they, them pronouns, is a nationally recognized youth strategist from the Human Rights Campaign, Youth Ambassador, and UNFPA Youth Focal Point. They have used storytelling to shift national and global conversations on LGBTQ+ rights, reproductive justice, and youth power. Rehman's work has been honored by the President Biden with a Lifetime Achievement Award, a White House Commendation, and the Diana Humanitarian Award. And they have raised over $1.6 million in scholarships and grants to continue their advocacy. And then we have Ray Loux, he, they pronouns, is a rising sophomore at Louisiana State University. But their journey as a changemaker began in high school. When anti-trans legislation threatened his rights, Ray didn't wait. He showed up. He organized youth rallies, met with legislators, and spoke truth to power every day after school. Their work has been featured nationally and in the pages of the Scalawag magazine, where Ray wrote about the power of queer community. Ray continues to be a bold voice for justice in the South and beyond. And then we have Erica McPheeters, she, they pronouns, is the 95th Miss Kentucky State University, a political science major and public health advocate who leads with intention and impact. From her HIV awareness work with the Human Rights Campaign to her platform on student preparedness and civic engagement, Erica represents the brilliance of Black queer leadership and the legacy of HBCUs as incubators of justice and liberation.
I have promised that even though I often go off script, like always, these young people have prepared certain questions. So I'm gonna use the questions that they prepared because it would really be unfair for me, as much as I would like to just riff off what Skye just said. I want to just make sure that I do at least one question that you prepared, which is, Rehman, you've worked, I know you've spoken at the UN, you really understand storytelling and the connection between storytelling and voting and organizing. And if we can get back to that, I will get back to that one. That's a good, important skill building. But you've worked across international movements from the U.S. to so many global youth platforms. And so I really wanted to ask you, what are young people around the world? You got a bunch of educators here. What are young people around the world teaching us about building a resistance, a resilience about resistance, and about building democracy around borders? I just, in the introduction, talked a little bit about how we built resistance, when in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. You're doing it right now. Tell us what you're doing. Tell us your observations, what you're doing, and whether you're optimistic or pessimistic.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for the introduction, and it's an honor to be here. Yeah, I would say that increasingly I feel like we've often become blind, or at least we're not truly listening when we hear things like statistics. I think especially with the current Trump administration, we see that people are just becoming numbers. And I think that for me, that was one of the biggest issues, because we all have lives. And when we see that people are dying, for example, just in the Trump administration's ending of PEPFAR, which provides HIV/AIDS medications to those in need, especially those in sub-Saharan Africa, we've already seen 60,000 people die because of that. And when we read that...
Say that again. How many people?
60,000.
Since January.
Yes. And there's a predicted over the next year that that'll rise to 350,000. But when we hear that number, 60,000, I don't think we realize that each of those 60,000 people have a story. And if we were to listen to their stories, then I think we would be here for a year or longer or forever, because each of those had just had such big and fulfilling lives that are now gone, especially LGBTQ folk in these very vulnerable contexts. So I think something that's been really important for me has been trying to bring those voices themselves, as people define it themselves, into these international spaces, which are so often detached from...
Let me just say, wasn't PEPFAR a Bush proposal?
I believe so, and then it was refunded under Trump.
I just want to make sure that people understand what PEPFAR is, that it was bipartisan. It was about soft power. It was about understanding that soft power was in a national interest, and Trump re-upped it. So we're talking about a bipartisan proposal to actually save people's lives in Africa.
Yes.
Just wanted to punctuate the point.
Yes, and most certainly one of the most successful programs in global health ever, actually. But yeah, so I think that's kind of been one of my driving forces, because when I think about democracy, I think about listening to people. I think of equity, which is an increasingly banned word, but I think we need to say it even more, and we need to talk to people and recognize that democracy lives amongst us, and we need to collaborate and talk about it to make sure that democracy continues to thrive. But one specific effort that I worked on was with the World Health Organization and specifically the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn, and Child Health. And I was one of the co-leaders of this campaign called What Young People Want, which was a year-long campaign. I was one of our leaders of our digital committee. So we created essentially a chatbot to talk to, I believe the current number is 1.5 million young people and adolescents, especially from the global south, on what their health needs were, where we gave young people this open-ended way of just talking about their values, their experiences, and then we were able to send that over to their governments. And then we were able to get commitments to adolescent health and well-being across, I want to say, 100 different countries. So I think that's just one way that I think that we can learn from the global south, and we can learn from those traditions focused on things like oral storytelling and using those, how people talk about these issues themselves, and then elevate it to these other platforms. And I couldn't think more about the role of teachers that played in that dissemination process at the World Health Organization, where we need these trusted adults to be that linkage to allow young people to just talk. Because and I know that this was true with my own teachers, but my teachers were the first people that I opened up to. And if we're able to have teachers who create these cultivate these really beautiful communities, even despite what we're seeing politically, I think we can just bring that many more voices to where it needs to go so we can create change locally, nationally, and globally. Thank you.
So storytelling is a way of knitting communities together and creating trust.
Exactly.
And then also broadening it.
And actually like a form of like living through democracy at the local level.
Right. And making democracy real.
Exactly.
Which is what equity does too. Fantastic. So we got a lot of Kentuckians here today. And we are hoping and working to make sure that Kentucky is okay, given that FEMA seems not to be showing up. But I digress. So you are probably the youngest voice on this panel. You might actually be the youngest voice in this room right now. Just saying. Yes. So, and I think that there's a lot of us who watch what you do, your power, your persistence, you individually, as well as people that you have, created or enabled to create in your community because of your boldness and your courage. So I really want to ask you, be a translator for the teachers in this room. Help us, some of us are still baby boomers. So I know it's sad, but help us think, understand, not in the question that one's parental unit would ask about, help us understand you, but help us understand the aspiration of people you have been working with over the course of these last couple of years to try to be seen. Like, what are Gen Z young people thinking? What are Gen Alpha young people thinking? And what do you say to yourselves when a baby boomer asks you that kind of stupid question?
I think Gen Z and Gen Alpha, I think we're angry. We're angry about a lot of things. We're angry about having things taken away from us. We're angry about losing our healthcare,
Wait. Let me just say one thing. You're talking about both rights as well as things like healthcare?
Yes.
Okay. Explain that to us a bit.
Personally, I lost access to my healthcare, my right to talk about my identity in school, my right to use bathrooms in school in 2023 with the passage of SB 150 in Kentucky. And that made me and a lot of other young people really angry. And I think that anger is what's motivating this generation and what's pushing us forward.
And is that anger, I think everybody could figure out, if you didn't know what that particular Senate law was, what it is right now in the great context in which Ray was talking. But is that anger a feeling of betrayal? Like, is it a feeling like, I was about to curse, are you adults doing to us? Like, talk a little bit more about, is it betrayal? Is it quizzical? Is it angry to want to do something about it? Or is it angry to want to just opt out?
Angry to want to do something about it. And yes, there is a feeling of betrayal in some ways, but I think it's more angry that our voices are being ignored, angry that we are being discarded or viewed as incapable while we are adults becoming adults just like everybody else. And angry in a sense that we don't want to sit still or not do something or not engage. Like, it's, for a long time, I just wanted to not engage. I felt powerless. But I think having all of this happen made me realize that being powerless wasn't really an option for how we're living today. And since I have the opportunity and the resources to be able to do something about it, I'm going to use everything within my own power to fight.
So before we all clap for you, you're with a bunch of adults who have understood that a union gives us power. Tell us how we help you.
Okay. I have two things, one positive and one negative. One of the things that's really helped me has been mentorship, having gay or trans or queer adults that I can look up to and receive guidance from, because seeing these mentors go on and be successful and live really fulfilling lives as queer adults is really inspiring and really uplifting. And then being able to go to them and ask them, hey, how did you do this? One of my mentors just got elected to office. One of my mentors is graduating from med school. One is getting double PhDs. And seeing this is what queer people are capable of is amazing and gives me a lot of hope. And then secondly, going back to what I was talking about earlier about how youth in general, not just queer youth, are looked down upon and seen as incapable. The student advocacy organization that I was a part of in Kentucky, the Kentucky Senate Voice Team, was trying to get a law considered or passed requiring a non-voting student member on school boards in every district. And we faced a lot of resistance from both sides of the aisle, from people who we viewed as our allies, and especially from the older generation of legislators. And that was really demoralizing to hear that from people that we look up to and trust, viewing us as incapable and looking down upon us just because we are new and we're learning. So I want people to be more aware of this bias and work more actively to counteract it.
And I think maybe off of what you just said, maybe we should be working with, since we're in a group, I'm looking at the staffers here, as well as the leaders of our LGBTQ plus caucus. Maybe we should actually have some conversations with legislators. Maybe we should have some conversations with the PTA. Maybe we should have some conversations amongst ourselves, like our education task force. Ray just said about what we can do as unionists to make sure that we do not undermine student voices in that kind of way. Having a non-voting student member of a school board is a pretty awesome thing, and it would really help in so many different ways. So maybe off of what you just said, maybe we take some actions in a way that I hope you feel affirmed. Okay? Thank you. Erica. Hello. Oh, I'm this.
That's okay. No.
No, it is what it is today. So
I just talk. I mean, listen.
Yeah, and I bet you could. I mean, I just, we're on some levels, and let me ask the question this way. You are in some ways at a really intriguing intersection between culture and the intersectionality of a whole bunch of your identities, right?
Yes.
And particularly, it's not just being Black, being queer, being femme, being Southern,
Right.
and, but it's also by being Miss Kentucky State University, 95th person in that role. It's a really interesting understanding of culture. And so talk to us about not only how you navigate that, but how you use that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'll say,
Thank you for letting me dwell a little bit on this question.
of course. I think you made a really great point initially about the intersection of my identity and in this role. So recently I just graduated in May. So thank you. Oh my goodness. Hello. So one thing I will say, this has been a very reflective question for me because I have really sat in my experiences with it. And one thing that I have really gathered is that the traditionalism of HBCUs, of Black culture, of spaces that are not necessarily identified for queer people oftentimes reduces, I think, identity in a sense. So for me to step into the position to be one of the first queer women to be in a role like that, I think in a lot of ways shifted how the role was viewed. It's funny. I can tell this story now because, it's over and done. But when I first came into the role, they wanted to change my title name to them KSU because my pronouns are she, they. And so they unfortunately didn't ask me that though. So I thought it was a little odd personally because I'm not sure what that refers to other than my personal identity. It doesn't really have anything, rooted in the tradition or the culture, I guess. And so a lot of what I did during my time as Miss Kentucky State was address the disconnect on our campus between queer students and their safety from student leadership and activism and being engaged on campus. I think in a lot of ways, students are discouraged because they don't have people who are willing to advocate for them or to advocate for their needs. And so I know a lot of my trans siblings on my campus didn't leave their rooms. They often felt uncomfortable because they were told they had to wait for a roommate or a space that actually housed them properly, which again, there shouldn't be a waiting process, right? There should be access. And so I think in a lot of ways, students are constantly not only dealing with their own understanding of identity, but how to navigate it now in a place where there's pushback, there's a disconnect. I think also the culture a lot of times reinforces those things. And so I also think about the bill, you might be able to help me, the bill that was just passed, I believe in February, that reduced all of our DEI efforts in Kentucky, specifically with public schools. And so it completely wiped out our Women's Week. So as Miss Kentucky State, I hosted a Women's Week. Also, it wiped out, I was the president of our LGBTQ club on campus. It also wiped out all of our events for the rest of the semester. In that, we wanted to push back, but I also think there was a layer of safety. My institution is in the capital, so in Frankfort of Kentucky. If anybody's familiar with Kentucky, Frankfort is exactly what you probably can imagine. There's, near my school, we have this place called the Trump House because it literally has like a flag that says all aboard the Trump train. And it's crazy. It's a time. It's a really different experience. So I say that to say, though, the environment never made space for us, right? Like being in HBCU in such a predominantly white space in town, and to know that legislation was never really defending us or supporting us, I think often changed our views and our perceptions on safety. And so I think that has kind of shifted my focus. And so now that I've graduated, I really want to address that at Kentucky State still, because now it's from a different place. I have a different stake in it. And so moving forward, I think there is a lot that Kentucky as a state must do to address the needs of trans students, of queer students, to make sure they are safe when they go to campuses, when they live their lives, when they are existing. And so that's kind of where I've been at now.
Thank you.
Of course.
I have a question for all of you, and I'm just looking to make sure that I have time for the rapid fire, the lightning round, because we have to end with joy. But the question for all of you, it's a compound question. You can elect which part of it or both that you want to answer. And Skye, this question is for you too, which is, look, I start as a civics teacher. and as a lawyer. And I just told a bunch of millionaires this week at the Democracy Alliance that we have to stop talking in a way that it makes it sound like everything that has happened up to now is fine. And that, and when people hear us say save democracy, even when they hear us say protect kids, sometimes they feel like we're saying status quo. And that the democracy, as important as it was when the framers did it, the framers also had a few problems, as we all know. But they really believed that in order that we couldn't have a king anymore in the country. And so they really believed in the three branches of government, because the three branches of government would stop there from being a king. But our democracy today is really different than how they framed it. It has to be a living, breathing thing. But when people hear the word, we're protecting democracy, we're like, well, where's our voice in it? Like, what happens in what you were just fighting for, what you all said? So the question becomes for me, because when people say democracy, I think about, okay, how to make it better. You have to engage in politics, because politics is the way in a democracy you get people, sorry to be so simplistic, but politics is a way in democracy you get people in the Congress who supposedly will then be about what you believe, not what the bully believes or not what somebody else believes. But that's like 2 or 3 points down the road. So the question is, as this generation, what do you think about politics? I mean, do you think it's like, ugh, I never want to see it. They're all corrupt. They're all awful. So what do you think about politics? And then if you think that it is a meaningful channel for change, how do we engage people in it? So when I say politics, I mean voting. I also mean policy. But right now, I'm really talking about politics and voting. So what's your personal views? But if you think it's important, how do we engage people in it?
I'll say this. I'm a political science major, or I just graduated with my degree in political science. So my take is a little, I feel that it's not only necessary to engage, but I think it is our responsibility in our democracy, right? I think in a lot of ways, the democracy won't run unless we have advocates, unless we have people who, vocalize our needs as a collective, as a community. And so for young people, I think it's very discouraging to see it, whether it be on social media, the news, or just in general. When you choose to engage in politics, I think there is always some type of resistance or pushback from other, whatever. And so in that,
like we just heard a real life story from Ray about that.
Exactly. And so, I think that discouraging nature of politics often changes how we talk about things. I think even with Skye just bringing up like Liz with TikTok, right? Like that is engagement in politics in a way, but it's dangerous, right? It's unsafe for queer people, and it makes it so that people don't want to. And so I think for young people, there is this lack of connection to it, especially with such radical movements happening right now. I think there's such a shift in how politics have really, been in our communities, and how it has continued to enable violence, right? And so a lot of young people, I think, choose to not engage so they don't experience that violence. In that, we have a lot of responsibility. Those who choose to engage in politics, I think, have a lot of responsibility to address it and bring it to other people to say, hey, voting matters. Voting, advocating for legislation that reflects your needs is important. And so there's a lot of ways to go about that, but I think a lot of students need it to be brought to them, if that makes sense.
Got it. No, of course. And you just said that about the lips of TikTok. I know we're on a podcast, so I'm not going to suggest what I'm going to suggest afterwards. Just wait and see.
So I really agree with what you were saying about we need to bring politics to people. I think that the accessibility of politics is a big issue because you can influence politics in two ways, with money or with time. And then I only have access to time, but a lot of people don't have the resources to be able to dedicate their time to politics. And so in whatever way we can, making politics more accessible, making it easier to vote, making it easier to get involved, having lobbying days where people can come to the Capitol and interact with people, and then like community engagement events, protests, anything that's easy to go to that can make someone feel engaged and make someone feel like they're actually doing something is really valuable.
Like next Saturday and No King's Day, all across the country. That's part of the reason that these events are all across the country.
Yes. And so basically making access to politics wider and also approaching it in non-traditional ways, because I feel like a lot of Gen Z is really disillusioned with the political environment right now. There's, especially living in Kentucky and now Louisiana, it's really easy to feel like my vote doesn't really make an impact. And then I go and speak to legislators and then they don't want to listen to me and it's really easy to feel not heard. But I don't think that disillusionment is equal to not being willing to do something or not being ready to take action. And I feel like we shouldn't accept. Yeah.
You're just having music to your answer.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, making it more accessible and then also being willing to approach it in different ways.
Got it. Okay, last two.
Yeah, I think I had a very similar thought to Ray. I think accessibility is really important. I'm originally from Texas, and I guess the way I got involved in advocacy and politics was at the local level with government advocacy around campaigns. When I was 10, I was setting up like little booths to teach people about different things like health and whatnot, but because I could see the inequities that were facing my community. And for me at least, the main barrier to my continued engagement was it just simply wasn't accessible. There would be phone banking at 2 p.m. and I was like, I have this thing called school and no one would understand that. And I felt like that was a big barrier where the specific interests of young people are just rarely centered in politics. And then also at the same time, I was rejected by my middle school's Model UN club. And so that's what actually turned me into interest in international advocacy, which is surprisingly very kind of inclusive, where they are trying. And the other benefit is they operate on European time zones, which means I could join before school. But yeah, it was a really wonderful kind of opening into the international politics world, which is kind of where I do a lot of my advocacy. And I've seen that at least in our current political context where there just isn't political will, especially from Congress, to get things done. Very often international institutions and mechanisms can, create a lot of pressure on these local kind of governments to do something. Every couple years, the Human Rights Council, even though Trump has tried to withdraw, every couple years, they do this little review of each country where they're like, this is how you're currently standing on human rights and this is what you need to do. And anyone from across the world can send in little pieces of feedback. Any teacher, if they're seeing a human rights violation, a form of discrimination, you can write a two-sentence note, and then that would be directly confronted at the Human Rights Council, and the US would have to respond to that. And I think lots of the time we view these international institutions as inaccessible. But I will say, every UN initiative that I've been in, American voices have actually been the least represented. We have countries which has maybe 20% access to internet, and we have higher response rates there. So I think it would be a really great effort, if y'all are interested, to use those mechanisms and levers that we have in the absence of domestic political will. And I'm happy to talk more about that or get y'all involved.
Is there a specific time during the year that we should be doing that?
Actually, they'll accept comments all the time. And then there's also the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Out of all the countries in the world, the US is the only country that has not ratified it or signed it. But for that convention, they're actually writing an optional kind of addition on early childhood education. But they actually will also accept submissions from children, and all of their documents are in child-friendly language so that accessibility is there, and children can literally just send in a couple messages, and then that's integrated within all these processes.
I want to see if we can be proactive on these ideas. So maybe we ask all of our task forces to take this idea up about actually trying to collate some of the human rights abuses we've seen this year, like getting rid of all of DEI, as an example, and some of the things that we've heard on this panel, as well as what we've heard from others. And we, between the International Committee and our Executive Council committees, we actually then do this work and we work with you on it so you feel affirmed about it, but also then you can use your channels to say, we're doing that and try to use that. So, okay. So I'm seeing a yes. So Yay. We're going to be doing that. We'll take your text, you'll take our text, blah, 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 blah. Good. Fantastic. Skye. Sorry, that was the baby boomer way of saying,
and also I'll make that, an assignment in your classrooms next year. Just saying. Yeah, so kind of adding on to what everyone has said, just really also acknowledging too that our bodies are political, right? Our existence as queer people are political because the goal was to erase queerness. Queerness has always existed in history, right? In all of human history from the time that we became human. So it is important to acknowledge that this is not normal to not acknowledge queerness in human history. So our existence is political no matter what. So us stepping outside this door is a moment of us being political, right? Us going to this march right now is a moment of being political.
Oh, let me ask you.
Oh, yeah.
Is UTLA going to do No King's Day next week?
We are. Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do is that we need to actually then speak our truths and actually act our truths.
Yeah.
Right?
No, exactly. Yeah. And it's really speaking to thinking also contract, right? For those of us that have bargaining power in certain states, looking at your contract, that is a political statement. We're working right now on putting how can we house our students in our contract. That's part of our bargaining right now in LA. And thinking about how we can make sure that LGBTQIA protections are in our contract, not worrying about state law, but putting it in our contract, right? So thinking about these political small movements, right, that we can make, as well as the larger ones like marches and things like that too. But thinking now too, what can we bring into our classrooms that will change how we're presenting things? Because I know we have laws and things, right, that are keeping us from stopping to do these things, but that doesn't mean we can't find ways around it.
We actually were one of the first unions to get language protecting LGBTQ in our contract. And we were the first, after the Village Voice, to get domestic partner benefits through it was quite the discussion with the uniform workers. That will be a discussion not on this podcast. But that Skye's point about how we did that, we did this back in the 1990s, and we got domestic partner benefits in 1993. And we were able to do our contract changes. So the contract is, as Skye just said, was actually the most important vehicle for protecting humanity. And that's what we use the contract to Skye's point. So, okay. Everybody doesn't have to answer every question, but if your activism had a theme song, what would it be? Dun, 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 dun. That wouldn't be it for me.
I said Happier Still by Big Joni.
Okay. Do you have it?
Screaming. It's probably going to be I'm That Girl by Beyonce.
Okay. People clearly know that song. Okay.
The girls get it.
You're okay. That's okay. We don't have to have everybody. But then I'm going to ask you this. What's your go-to rally, or marching shoe?
Shoe?
Shoe.
What I'm wearing right now.
Okay.
Yeah, Converse. Yeah, because you can run in them and you can walk very far in them.
Got
As
it.
you can.
Got
It's
it.
pretty hard with them too.
Got it.
If it's light outside and people will see me, probably my Doc Martens. But then
Ooh.
tonight I'll need to run in these.
Uh-huh.
I have a pair of gray hiking boots that are really comfortable that I'll probably be wearing later today.
So I love a good boot. Ooh, it's the Kentucky in me. So any boot, honestly, I'll take a Doc. I'll take a rain boot. I'll take a cowboy boot, actually. Anything. So a boot for me.
So after many years of in heels and frankly skirt suits, walking up 4 flights of stairs, concrete stairs to my classroom, since my classroom seemed to always be on the 4th floor, it's OC's. Okay. What snack are you bringing to the protest line or to a phone bank session? What snack?
Oh, I always bring like my salted almonds from Trader Joe's.
Hey,
so basic.
I love me a freeze-dried strawberry from like pack of strawberries, also from Trader Joe's, not dried. I've made that mistake multiple times.
Okay, but freeze-dried, not dried.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the difference?
Dried are like, they're like wet and chewy versus you get like a nice crunch with the freeze-dried.
Got it.
I agree with that. I have a history of bringing oranges.
I like that.
Oranges.
I like that a lot because that probably keeps you going. I was going to say bananas because I need to stay focused.
Yeah, bananas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, 2 more. Which LGBTQ plus icon, past, present, I would even say future, would you want to attend your birthday party this year? Like, who would you want to just show up?
I'll take my fellow panelists.
You should have gone last. Now we can't follow.
Sylvia Rivera.
Okay.
You know, maybe because she's in town, but Cynthia. Yeah, love her down.
I really want to meet Doechii, actually, so I kind of want Doechii right now. On a Doechii kick. So.
Okay. You have one social media post to spark a revolution. What would it say? And which medium?
Oh, that's controversial.
Which medium? You could use you could use all of them. I'm a blue sky girl myself, sorry.
Nope. Okay.
So honestly, because I'm from Kentucky and we're just so, Southern, I probably would try to incite something on Facebook. Oh. And I don't really know what I would say, but, there's enough like family and people who don't love queer people on Facebook for there to be anything. Like I could say, my cat is purple, and they're going to be like, oh my gosh, like,
Got it.
so I think I'm going to go with Facebook. And then from there, I'll like expand, go to Instagram. Yeah, we'll move on,
My cat is purple.
Exactly.
Love it. That's great. We don't have to do.
Yeah.
We can.
I was like,
do the next one.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know exactly what I would say because usually there has to be like a catalyst, and I'm like thinking, well, based on the catalyst, but like I usually go to Instagram first, then TikTok, so that's usually, and then Blue Sky, so those are the progression.
Got it.
Yeah, I would probably like take over the Library of Congress's social media pages and then like publish like the Equal Rights Amendment, because as long as the librarian does that, we have an amendment.
Right. We were trying to get the archivist just to publish it. That was one of the last things we could try to get. I'm looking at Melinda Person. That was one of the last things we tried to get the Biden administration to do. Just say it. Just get the archivist to say it. Okay. Last question, which is, what gives you hope? What gives you hope?
I mean, honestly, it's seeing queer elders because that tells me I can exist, especially seeing trans elders. Most of us haven't lived past 30 to 40. So seeing them living their full lives, finding queer joy, that gives me hope. And then also teaching the kids I teach every day and seeing how quickly they get it and they understand it, how many of them already have the words that I didn't get to have as a kid, that gives me hope. So
I had a similar answer. I was going to say queer young people. I think in a lot of ways, it reminds me of myself and it reminds me of where I once was. It also propels me to want to advocate, to make sure that they have a future to look forward to. And so I think a lot about my little sister, because you're never really done coming out, right? And so when I did tell her that I was going, you never stop. And unfortunately, I was talking to her and I told her, yeah, like I have a girlfriend or something like that or whatever. And she was like, oh, so when's the wedding? I was like, I love that you can ask me that because literally 10 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to. And I think about the fact that 20 years ago, it would have been inappropriate or it would have been uncomfortable for me to say that to her or, and granted, again, before my time, but there's so many instances that I think queerness has been erased, from our identities, our lives, our childhood. And so it really makes me hopeful to see queer young people, truly. Truly.
You too.
Okay.
This is a must answer question.
I was going to say, well, yeah, you guys you took my answers, but I have a lot of really impressive peers at LSU who are doing like protests every week and are doing like really, really capable people, and being able to see them and being able to do things myself and seeing like the queer adults that I know succeeding and being able to know trans elders and talk to people who have been through everything gives me a lot of hope, and being able to see how much joy this community has and how close this community is.
Yeah, I would say my AP chemistry teacher, she ruined my life. It was the hardest class ever, but I don't know. I did not survive and I hate chemistry now, but their presence as like a human, showing their existence, I had given me words. I just figured out that I was queer, and their presence just showed me that it was possible even in this house, and that it's okay to like talk about, like recognize that our bodies and who we are is inherently political. So yeah, I love them, even though they hated me on their exams. Make your test easy, please.
Speaking as one of those teachers who my students really thought I was much too hard on, they many years later have said to me, thank you, even though they hated me at that moment as the AP Gov teacher. All of you, all of you, I think I can speak for the assembled group here. You give us hope. You give us tremendous hope. This is what our future is, and this is what our future is worth fighting for. And so I just can't thank you enough, all of you, Erica, Ray, Rehman, Skye, for being with us today and for teaching all of us teachers what it means to fight, what it means to love, what it means to engage, and what it means to have a future. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Union Talk. Remember to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast and tune in every other week for a new episode. Thank you, be safe, and be well.